Hello there, my fellow myth and fantasy nerds. My name is Tanner, and I'd like to welcome you back to my YouTube channel. So, I may have spoken a bit too soon in my last video because now it's cooling off where I live, hence the cardigan. Hopefully, it warms up again soon. Knock on wood. Anyway, today's video is going to be a little bit different from my usual format. And that is because one of my newer obsessions, special interests, is that mysterious yet famous tabletop role playing game known as Dungeons and Dragons. Now, for those of you who don't know, Dungeons and Dragons, or D&D for short, is a game where multiple players create their own characters for a fantasy setting, while another player acts as the Dungeon Master, or DM for short. This player acts as the game's storyteller slash referee, if that makes sense. Now, together, the player characters create an adventuring party and do things such as solving dilemmas, engaging in battles, interacting with both themselves and the other inhabitants of the fantasy world, usually portrayed by the DM, and even gather treasure and explore dungeons. It's so fun. Now, one of my favorite YouTubers, Ginny D, created the D&D Tag a few months ago, and she invited other YouTubers to participate in answering 15 questions about their experiences playing D&D that she created. I'll put links to both of the original videos up in the cards and down in the description if you want to check them out. So I decided that for this week's video, I would be participating in the D&D tag and answer all 15 questions as best I can. Now, for some context, I've only ever played one game of D&D so far, and it was a level 5 one-shot, which is a D&D game where the beginning and the end of the story takes place in one game session, as opposed to several sessions over one long continuous story arc. My sister was the DM, and the other player characters were played by two of my brothers and my brother-in-law. So make sure you leave a like on this video and subscribe down below, since that always helps. And without further ado, here is the D&D tag. Just getting the questions on my phone. Here we go. Question 1. What was your very first Dungeons & Dragons character? My first ever character was from that one shot that I mentioned. His name was Tricking Treat, or Trick for short, and he was a Tabaxi Archfey Warlock. Now, for those of you who don't know, a Tabaxi is a D&D race of humanoid cats, and a Warlock is a spellcasting class who get their magic from a pact that they made with a powerful extra-dimensional entity. In Trick's case, his patron was an Archfey, a particularly powerful fairy. His patron, Hirsum, the Prince of Fools, is written as the jester of the Fey court, and their pact was that Hirsum would grant Trick magic in exchange for Trick pranking any tyrant that Hirsum deemed as needing to be taken down a peg or three. Also, side note, when I portrayed him, I basically tried doing my best impression of Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride, which was definitely a fun way to practice voice acting. Question 2. Which D&D class is your least favorite to play, or do you simply not want to play? I don't really have a least favorite class, but I definitely think that the class I would least like to play is probably Fighter, simply because it's really the most basic class you can play in D&D, in my opinion. Question 3. What D&D spell would you most want to have in real life? Probably Hero's Feast, simply because then I wouldn't have to worry about making a mess when making food for other people. I could simply cast this spell and it would summon a feast fit for up to 12 people, which would definitely make planning parties and get-togethers a lot less of a hassle. Question 4. What's your favorite D&D monster? Well, I'm pretty partial to the monsters that are based on actual mythical creatures like chimeras and manticores and pegasi and unicorns. But if I had to pick a favorite, I would have to pick dragons. I just I don't know. I love the concept of like D&D dragons simply because they don't just have one singular species of dragon. They have 10 different species which are all based on the color of their scales. And then those 10 are divided into two different groups. The 5 Evo chromatic dragons, black, blue, green, red, and white, and the good metallic dragons, brass, bronze, copper, gold, silver. I just I just think these versions of dragons are so cool and a nice spin on an old classic in my opinion. Question 5. What's your favorite NPC slash villain that you've encountered slash created? So I personally have not created any NPCs or villains since, I haven't DM'd yet. But I do remember that for the D&D one shot, my sister created this NPC that my party and I had to help. So basically, the story was he was a wizard who was betrayed by his apprentice, and the apprentice stole his wand of polymorph and turned him into a sheep. So the whole point of the adventure was to help this poor wizard turned sheep get his wand back from his apprentice and turn him back to normal. It was so fun. Question 6. Has one of your characters ever died, and if so, what killed them? Okay, so none of my characters have died per se, but Trick did get to the point where I was making death saving throws, but our cleric healed me before anything really bad happened. Question 7. What's your best natural 20 story? Well, considering the highest that I've ever rolled was, I think, 15 or 16, I do not yet have a Nat 20 story, much less a best Nat 20 story. I mean, in fact, I don't really entirely remember if any of my other party members got a natural 20. But if you guys are watching this and can remember if you got any natural 20s in our campaign, please either, let me know in the comments or shoot me a text, and maybe that'll help jog my memory. Question 8. What is your best natural 1 story? This is a fun one. It was our first ever battle, and my party was battling against some of the minions of the Wizard's Apprentice, which included but weren't limited to a half orc and 2 wolves. So my turn comes up, and I decided for my first attack, I would try to cast Eldritch Blast. So I made the attack roll, and wouldn't you know it, natural 1. So the way we role played it was Trick, instead of summoning a crackling beam of energy from his hand, only got a puff of smoke. Question 9. What is the highest level you've ever played a character to? Well, to put it simply, the characters of the one shot I played in were all level 5 characters, and Trick was no exception. So far, only up to 5. Question 10. What's your favorite magical item? Probably the bag of holding, simply because of how useful it could be in real life. Now, for those of you who don't know, the bag of holding is a 2-foot by 4-foot bag that is magically enchanted to hold up to 500 pounds of stuff, as long as said stuff doesn't exceed 64 cubic feet. I think that having a bag that can hold a lot of extra stuff, regardless of how it looks on the outside, would be a very useful item to have. Question 11. If you had an IRL alignment, what would it be? See, here's the thing. I actually have taken the official D&D alignment quiz, and the whole time I was thinking that I would turn out to be chaotic good, so combining a good heart with a free spirit, kind of like Robin Hood in a way. But turns out I'm neutral good, which essentially means that I just prefer doing good for the sake of doing good, whether that means breaking the rules or enforcing them, if that makes sense. Question 12. If you had to date one of your characters, which one would you pick? Well, considering all of the D&D characters I've created so far are distinctly male, and I'm about as straight as an arrow, I don't really think I would date any of my characters. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if I had to, I think it would most likely be Earthestel, my Dragonborn Warlock character, simply because I made his Warlock patron Cupid, the Archer of Romance, who incidentally I flavored as an Archfey, and therefore I think that he would either A, know the quickest way to my heart, so to speak, and or he could definitely give me some first class romantic advice. Question 13. Is there a character you want to play, but haven't had a chance to play yet? How much time do we have? To be quite honest, if I ran through the entire list of D&D characters that I've created but haven't yet played, we would be here all day. Suffice it to say, yes, there are many, many, many characters that I would like to play at some point or another. Question 14. Are you a dice goblin or a dice minimalist? Well, here's the thing. I don't currently own a set of dice, so I cannot say whether I'm a dice goblin or a dice minimalist just yet. And finally, question 15. What rule or mechanic have you never quite wrapped your brain around? Honestly, I've never really understood material spell components. I just don't understand why you would need certain items to cast spells, like bat guano for fireball, or a piece of wool for minor illusion. Why not just cast these spells with a wave of a hand and a spoken incantation? Why do I have to have this random object to cast it? I, I, it just, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me personally. And there we have it. That was the D&D Tag. If you like this video and you want more, please give this video a like and subscribe down below so you don't miss any new videos. Also, if you have any other ideas for any future videos, please leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and who knows, it might just happen. Alright, well, that's all the time I have for this video, so I will see you all next week with a brand new one. See you guys then.